I'll be honest with you, to be frank, with all due respect to everyone else, and even my monologue, this is the part of the show I'm looking most forward to whenever I discuss anything culturally or historically. Darryl Cooper is my favorite. He just is. He's the host of the MartyrMade podcast. He always has a different perspective, an interesting perspective on things. Darryl, one of the things that's fascinating, and when I say fascinating, I generally mean horrifying, but about World War I is how technology advanced so fast and how that is what got us so much carnage like the world had never seen before. We're used to things like this today, but talk about the difference technologically in World War I versus the wars that came before it and what it meant for people.
Well, if you think about it, the last time that European powers had been engaged in a prolonged, serious conflict against each other was probably the Crimean War of the 1850s. That was, 60 years before World War I kicked off. And as you say, things had completely transformed. I mean, you talk about the introduction of just, even something like barbed wire, which proved to be such a massive factor on the World War I battlefield. That wasn't invented until 1867. And, so you have a prime example of a war where the technology had developed dramatically since that last major conflict. But because they hadn't been engaged in a conflict like that in a long time, the tactics had not adjusted and the leadership mentality had not adjusted to the new reality. And so, not one of the powers that got involved in 1914 expected the war to last very long. They all had unrealistic expectations of how the war was going to go and how their forces were going to handle the war. And this affected their reasoning when deciding whether to go to war. Just as the memory of the Great War's carnage affected the reasoning of many Allied leaders when they let Hitler's early aggression pass for fear of another conflagration. And as real quick, I know we're talking about World War I, but something that you said is exactly true. Is technological advancement had advanced back then. It like you said, we're used to it now. It seems like if we have a war every 10 years, everything changes. I don't know how much how you would have liked fighting in the cities of Iraq with all the drone technology and stuff we're seeing in Ukraine now. And that's a good example of Russia thinking about the last war, and we're going to go in there against Ukraine and do our thing. But things have changed, and they found that out the hard way.